In this lesson, we're going to cover the different supply chain risks that you may encounter out in the real world. In the ever-evolving technology landscape, understanding and mitigating supply chain risks is a really big consideration for cybersecurity professionals. So, in this lesson, we're going to focus on the potential vulnerabilities that can arise at various points within the supply chain, especially from hardware manufacturers, software developers, and service providers. First, let's look at hardware manufacturers. At the heart of supply chain risk lies the complexities of product manufacturing. When you consider buying a product like a router or a switch, it becomes really clear and apparent that they are composed of hundreds of distinct little components. Each of these components is sourced from various suppliers, and they can each be a potential vulnerability if they're tampered with or if sourced from untrustworthy vendors. So, to prevent issues with our hardware, we really need to ensure that we conduct rigorous supply chain assessments to trace the origins of our hardware and to determine the integrity of the components in our enterprise networks. The origin of the components within our network infrastructure can also define the trustworthiness of the entire device that we're looking at. For entities with a minimal risk appetite, such as the Department of Defense, measures like the Trusted Foundry program have been implemented to ensure that all the hardware being installed in their networks has undergone a strict check to ensure they're authentic and that the microprocessors in them have been manufactured securely to perform only their designated functions without any kind of deviations from the known good baseline. Another often overlooked risk is the purchase of additional hardware from secondary or aftermarket sources. While these options might be budget-friendly, the risk of acquiring counterfeit or tampered devices can be pretty high. These devices may have been tampered with and their code could be modified to include malware like a Trojan, or they could allow remote access or unauthorized access into your enterprise networks, or they could cause all sorts of other operational failures. Now, our supply chain risks are not confined solely to the world of hardware, though. This brings us to our second type of supply chain risk, software developers and software providers. Often, the risk to our networks is going to come from the software we purchase and install onto that enterprise network. Software developers and software providers are integral cogs in our supply chains, and any software that we're going to use in our modern enterprise networks should be checked to ensure it's properly licensed, that it's authentic, and that the software is free of known vulnerabilities or bugs. Additionally, the software should be scanned with a good antivirus or anti-malware solution to ensure that it's free of any malicious code. This type of software assessment is a lot easier to conduct if the software you choose to use is considered to be open source. That way, you can review the entire source code if you need to as well. But even if you're using a proprietary piece of software like Microsoft Office, you can still run some simple scans and vulnerability assessments against those programs to ensure that they're not vulnerable to known attacks by a threat actor. Now, third, we have service providers and managed service providers known as MSPs. These service providers, especially those offering software as a service, pose some unique challenges to the security of our enterprise networks. When you entrust a service provider to access your data, how can you ensure that the information they're getting actually maintains its confidentiality and integrity? Are the managed service provider's cybersecurity protocols robust enough to protect all of your data? And in the face of a security breach, would this service provider be well equipped to provide the necessary support and cooperation that you might need to conduct a full-scale incident response or forensic investigation? These are all of the types of things that your organization needs to think about when they're trying to make a risk decision about whether or not to use one service provider or another, and it's all going to be based on their risk appetite and understanding the potential ramifications of a data breach to your organization. So remember, supply chain risks are multifaceted, and organizations must approach them with a holistic strategy. From the tangibility of hardware to the intangibility of services, every aspect has to undergo a supply chain audit and assessment. Vendor selection is going to be one of those really important things, and it's not just a matter of cost efficiency, but also you need to factor in due diligence, historical performance, and a commitment to security of the vendor you're considering. Remember, in the realm of supply chain risk to your organization's security posture, you are only as strong as the weakest link in that supply chain.